Hello everyone, got a new video for you. It's been 2 weeks, but with my regular gainful employment, I seem to be able to make these every payday or so. But enough about that. What I have here is a Ready Player One set of 4 figures from Funko. I got this from GameStop. I was asking if they had any Ready Player One merchandise. What I knew they had was a bunch of blank books, like little journals with the IOI, logo on them. It's an element from the movie, so I won't go into too much detail here. But yeah, these are the four of the main characters: Parzival, Artemis, Arch, IROC. I'm very sorry that I don't know the names of the actors on these, except for IROC. He was played by T.J. Miller. I don't really too much television or whatever these days. And as far as movies go, Ready Player One was like the last movie I've seen in ages. But yeah, they all did a pretty good job. And this figure set here from Funko is, well, you can see on the back. Funko, if you don't know, are probably most well known for making vinyl pop figures. But at the same time, they also had a while back, for comparison's sake, I want to show you. They had this line called Reaction. Here's one of the figures from that line. I might do a more in-depth figure video on those if I can find some in the box, because I don't generally like to talk about out-of-the-box figures anymore. But yeah, Funko created it because they got their hands on a bunch of action figures made by Kenner, or they got the molds on them. They were supposed to be released in 1979 to tie into the success of Alien, similar to the line of Star Wars toys they'd made 2 years prior. The only figure that ever got released was a large-scale figure of the Xenomorph, which was criticized because it was one of the first times something made for children was based off of an R-rated property that they probably wouldn't have even seen. So the line was canceled and the molds sat unused for decades until Funko got their hands on them. And because tastes change and there's more of a collector's market as well as an adult figures market, they were able to finally release them. Now, much like Star Wars figures from back then, you can tell these only have 4 points of articulation because they were based off of very simple figure lines when toys were made back then. I'm not sure, but they might actually also be slightly smaller than the Kenner Star Wars figures. I don't know how big those were. Kenner existed and made figures up until the late 90s. If I could get my hands on, like, maybe a Power of the Force figures, those might be able to be compared to, because I think they were still pretty much in this scale up until then. But, yeah, they pretty much dropped the Reaction line name after a few years, but they still do this. I've seen tie-in figures to Stranger Things, Cobra Kai, because Reaction... they made action figures based on a lot of really retro properties. I've seen Marty McFly figures. There was a line of monster figures from Michael, Jason, Freddy. They also had like the Universal monsters, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, Dracula, and Nosferatu. There were figures for The Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah, pretty much anything from the 80s, 90s, at least, had a figure line. Now, this doesn't have the Reaction name on it, but it's pretty much the same concept. In addition, it is more of a more modern property than what was made on the Reaction line. So let's open this up and see what we got here. Excuse me for just a minute. Okay, so... yeah, this little background in here wasn't much. I think it's supposed to resemble going into the Oasis, but here we have them all. Artemis, Parzival, Arch, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, IROC. IROC doesn't come with any weapons, but all the other figures do. Let's see if I can pop them all out. I think it's pronounced Arch. Sorry about that. Bear with me on this, people. Okay, so, yeah, out of the box, you can tell immediately there's a major difference between these and the reaction figures. They have a lot more detail, Ellen Ripley being based off a figure from the 70s, as well as the entirety of the reaction line wasn't as detailed. So everything from holsters, to body detailing, to paint detailing, to, I don't know if that'll focus. The likeness is, I'm not going to say uncanny, but it is definitely pretty good. And there's a lot more articulation points. The Ellen Ripley figure only had 4 points in the arms and leg movements. The feet move? No, those are solid. I was testing to see if the feet at least moved on the Ellen Ripley figure. There's an ankle joint here, but I don't. It's a little tight because these are fresh out the box. There we go. There we go. So, better articulation, even the head articulation. Basic, but actually pretty good for what it's worth. I think this might actually be better than most Hasbro figure articulation these days. Unless you go for something like, say, Star Wars The Black Series. If you want the really nice figures on that. And because Ready Player One was a, it was a movie that featured a lot of, references and, ideas for, well, for things that got made. We've got the pistol from RoboCop, pulse rifle from Aliens, and I'm not sure what this is. I think it might be from Overwatch, or, I'm sorry, I don't play Overwatch. I just know that Overwatch was one of the, it was a prominent, feature in Ready Player One, basically. And, it was one of the more modern ideas that they put in aside from... See, the original book Ready Player One was based off of, it mostly stuck to the 80s in terms of references and material, because the author was a big fan of that decade. There might have been a few 90s references, and if there were any references to something past those decades, usually it was a swipe at them. Like, there was a take that towards, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The Cyrock figure is pretty nice. It's very well detailed. Yeah, but the movie version I've heard is a lot better. It has just about as much references, but they also, stuff from like the 90s and 2000s, Overwatch, Jurassic Park, the Peter Jackson King Kong. Yeah, that's the magic about Spielberg. If you give him a source material that he doesn't like, he'll change it to his vision, and you could argue his vision is actually better. Like with his film Jaws. He hated every character in the novel Jaws except the shark. Because every character in the novel was basically just an unlikable person, so he completely overhauled their personalities to be more likable in his film version. And yeah, not much else to say. This is a very nice line of figures, a step up from their reaction line, because it has more detail and more articulation. Ready Player One was a great movie. It was so great. As soon as when I was done watching it, I actually looked up to see if it could ever be possible to have fully rendered 3D VR technology that could basically take you into an entire other world where pretty much anything and everything you could ever imagine is displayed before your eyes and is interactive in the way that they could in RPO. It's not as spot on as it was in the film, which is set like in the next 30 years in the future. But there are... That was not intended. There are advances in virtual reality rendering technology that we are making. I looked it up, and at best, when it comes to rendering 3D environments, you've got something like VR Chat, which looks... It doesn't look very good, but this technology we take for granted it's in its infancy, more or less. We still have a long way to go before we're able to truly create simulations on what we saw in The Matrix, Ready Player One, or pretty much any sort of sci-fi like that. But we are on the path to doing so. There are Kickstarters into research and development, finding ways to integrate the levels of CGI rendering in terms of filmmaking and gaming onto the technology that is very limited on VR. as well as the immersion factor. But, yeah, that's all I had to say about that. I loved Ready Player One. Best movie I've seen all summer. And if I get more of those reaction figures and their cards, I might do a more in-depth video on those. But thank you and have a nice day. Goodbye.